You want to start a business, but you don't. You want to get in shape, but you don't. You tell yourself this is the year you finally fix your life, but somehow, nothing changes. Same habits, same excuses, same, I'll start tomorrow. And after a while, you start believing the lie that you're just lazy. But you're not. The truth is harder to accept. Your standards are optional. Keep saying, just this once, and you slowly become someone you don't respect. Not because you lack ability, but because you keep letting small decisions slide. The problem isn't big mistakes, it's the quiet ones you ignore every day. This isn't about habits. It's about your standards, your promises, your identity. Lower them, and everything else, your results, your confidence, your future, starts matching that version of you. And I'm not here to give you another list of tips you'll feel good about and forget by tomorrow. That doesn't change anything. I'm here to give you rules. Yes, rules. 10 life rules. And listen carefully. Rule number 1 will expose you. Rule number 5 will wake you up. And rule number 10? That's the one that changes everything. So don't skip ahead, because if you miss those, you miss the entire point. So, stop negotiating with yourself. That's rule number 1. And before you brush that off as something you've already heard, let me ask you something. How many times have you told yourself, just this once? Just this once I'll skip the workout. Just this once I'll spend the money. Just this once I'll start tomorrow. It sounds harmless in the moment, almost comforting. I used to do the exact same thing. I would plan everything perfectly at night, wake up early, work hard, eat clean, and then the next day, one small excuse would slip in. I'm tired. I'll do it later. It's not that serious. And I believed it. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't breaking a habit. I was breaking trust with myself. And that's where everything starts to fall apart. Because every time you negotiate with yourself, you lower your standard without even noticing it. And once your standards become flexible, your results become unpredictable. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. This isn't about motivation. That's rule number 2. Motivation is unreliable. Some days you feel like you can conquer the world, and other days you can't even get out of bed. So if your entire life is built on waiting to feel motivated, you're building it on something that disappears overnight. I learned this the hard way. There were days I felt unstoppable. I'd work for hours, plan everything, feel like I finally figured it out. And then the next day? Nothing. No energy, no focus, no drive. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? But nothing was wrong. I was just relying on the wrong thing. Because motivation is a feeling, and feelings change. So, what's the alternative? That's where rule number 3 comes in, and this is where things start to shift. Identity over habits. Let me explain. For the longest time, I kept saying, I need to be more disciplined. But deep down, I still saw myself as someone inconsistent. Someone who starts, but doesn't finish. And guess what? My actions kept proving that true. Because your brain is always trying to stay consistent with who you believe you are. So even if you try to force new habits, your identity pulls you back. That's the real limitation. Not your ability, your self-image. So the shift isn't I'll try harder. The shift is this is who I am now. I started telling myself I'm the type of person who follows through. And at first, it felt fake. But then something interesting happened. I started acting differently. Not perfectly, but differently. And that's when I realized something most people miss. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. But even with that shift, there's a moment where everything feels like it's about to break. You know exactly what you should do, but you don't feel like doing it. That's rule number 4, standards over feelings. Because let's be honest, you're not always going to feel like it. There are days you feel tired, distracted, overwhelmed. And in those moments, your brain will try to negotiate again. Skip it today. Do it tomorrow. And if you listen, you're back at 0. I've been there. Sitting there, knowing exactly what I needed to do, but feeling this resistance that made everything feel 10 times harder. And the turning point wasn't forcing myself to go all in, it was lowering the barrier. I told myself, just do 10 minutes. And most of the time, once I started, I kept going. But even when I didn't, I still kept the promise. And that builds something powerful. Because discipline isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. Now here's where another hidden problem shows up. You start doing better, you start gaining momentum, and then suddenly, you feel busy all the time, but nothing is actually moving forward. That's rule number 5, protect your time. Because not all busy is productive. I used to fill my days with things that felt important, scrolling, replying, random tasks, but at the end of the day, nothing meaningful was done. And I'd wonder why I felt stuck. The truth? I was giving my time away too easily. And if everything gets your attention, nothing gets your focus. So I had to ask myself a hard question: what am I actually prioritizing? Because your calendar doesn't lie. It shows you exactly what your life is built around. But here's the uncomfortable part. Once you start seeing that clearly, you can't unsee it. And that leads to rule number 6, audit, don't avoid. Because most people don't track their habits, their money, their time, not because they don't know how, but because they're afraid of what they'll find. I avoided it too. I didn't want to face how inconsistent I was, how much time I was wasting. But the moment I started tracking, everything changed. It was uncomfortable, yes, but it gave me control. Because you can't fix what you refuse to see. And once you see it, you're faced with a choice. Stay the same or change. That's where rule number 7 comes in. Discipline is self-respect. This is the part where the emotional shift happens. Because every easy decision feels good in the moment. Skipping feels good. Avoiding feels good. Comfort feels good. But those small decisions? They stack. And one day you wake up and realize you've built a life around comfort instead of growth. I had that moment. That realization that nothing external was holding me back, it was my own choices. And that's a hard truth to accept. But it's also powerful, because it means you can change it. Now here's where people get it twisted. They hear all this and think they need to be harsh on themselves. But that's not the answer. That's rule number 8, stop confusing self-compassion with excuses. There's a difference between understanding you're human and letting yourself off the hook every time it gets uncomfortable. I used to say, it's okay, I'll do it tomorrow. And it sounded kind, but it was keeping me stuck. Real self-compassion sounds different. It says, yeah, you messed up. Now fix it. No shame, no guilt, but also no escape. And once you start living like that, something else shifts. You stop tolerating things that don't align with you anymore. That's rule number 9, stop explaining your standards. Not everyone is going to understand your boundaries. Not everyone is going to like the changes you're making. And that's okay. I used to over-explain everything, why I couldn't go out, why I needed time, why I was focusing on my goals. But the truth is, when your standards are clear, you don't need to explain, you just act accordingly. And finally, rule number 10, the one that holds everything together. Do what you said you'd do. This is where self-trust is built. Not through big wins, not through motivation, but through small promises kept daily. Because at the end of the day, if you don't trust yourself, nothing else matters. No system, no plan, no strategy will work. But when you start proving to yourself again and again that you follow through, everything changes. Your confidence grows, your discipline strengthens, your identity shifts. And that's the domino effect. One small promise leads to another, and before you know it, you're not the same person anymore. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to keep negotiating with your own life? Because the future you want isn't built on motivation. It's built on the standards you choose to enforce today.